Hello, good morning and welcome to City TV's coverage of the 2018 mid-year budget review. In a bit, we'll be going to Parliament where the Finance Minister, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, is expected to tell lawmakers what will be in that budget for the rest of the year. But before we do that, we'll have discussions for Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, who since his assumption as finance minister has appeared to present the budget for 2 times. This is the third, actually. This first one is mid-year budget. The statement for the first one didn't get that much attention. We'll find out why this is getting that much attention and what is likely to be in that budget. So I have in the studio 2 gentlemen who will help these issues and many more. And the first is Mr. Kwabena Ofosu-Appiah, and also host of a breakfast show. You speak to people every day, you interview people every day, you talk about the economy every day. Why is this one getting so much attention?
I think it's the government's own fault, in a way, if fault is the word. Mid-year budget changes, like maybe there are major oil shocks or some massive issue happens, you change. For example, in previous mid-year budgets, we planned to do some oil because of some challenges with the FPS, so we couldn't drill. Then they will change their expenditure, their revenue assumptions and expenditure. So it hasn't been that much a big deal. Taxes. Pay more tax if you get this and this and that, for the media to jump on it. All the civil society groups, all the business groups, including his, said, hey, yeah, so now everybody's talking about the budget. What has brought us where we are? Maybe.
Okay, so I'll pick your thoughts on
the tax net. Now, it appears it hasn't worked that well. The new revenues we're expecting. Don't forget, this government has very ambitious plans. Free SHS, $500 million. 1D, 1F requires money. One village, one dam requires money. Plenty of money. So you marry ambitious fiscal plans from the presidency, a tax, a revenue target that has not been. So, and a bigger government, 110 ministers, a lot of bureaucracy. So they've realized that, and they can't borrow. Revenue side, which they are trying to increase. There's the expenditure side, which they have to manage because it's getting bigger. And then because we are just coming to the end of an IMF, and I think it's backfired. So they said we are not going to go into any VAT. Mid-year
budget and the likelihood that we'll have taxes increase, etc. How did you guys take it?
Thank you very much. You know, brought that huge attention on an otherwise exercise that would have slided without this pomp and party. The deliverables of the 2018 budget. Budgets, basically, we looked at revenue generation and how we're going to spend it. And we realized that if you take most of the palpable interventions being generate revenue, you don't look at exempting a lot of duties. Then you look at the issues of the suspense. Of course, they also mention affects everybody. So if you look at the conversations over time, the interventions and all of that, we thought that if we did not pick earlier enough, it stood the chance to derail the kinds of expectations that government has into the future. And beginning to look like, even though we did not pay, we tried to raise our own bit of the flag, some of these things and the rate at which they were coming. But of course, maybe as we go on, we will get into some of the details of the things that we did, wanting to invest, backed up and thrown away. And here we are
to our revenue generation dipping. At that time, when we started taking off the nuisance taxes, which...
I mean, you have a tax on a VAT on financial service, not good. So it made political sense to remove them. But as you're saying, some of the taxes, in my view, were meant to bring in some money. For example, the sin taxes, tax of condoms, alcohol, and some of those things were meant to bring in some money from sectors that we really didn't think were core. Now, there's a fine balance between direct and indirect tax. The problem is that we pay too little direct taxes and pay a lot of indirect taxes. Why do we pay a few direct taxes? A lot of people, we don't know who they are, we don't know what they do. So even though we can charge you income tax, we don't know how many other people are earning how much to get income tax from. This on imported goods, there are taxes on sales, VAT, and those kinds of things. What you need to do is to find a fine balance between the two. So I think that some of the nuisance tax was not replicated with increase in the direct taxes, because the nuisance taxes were not direct taxes. Do you understand? So if you remove the nuisance tax he pays when he goes to buy something, you haven't replicated it by creating a system where you can collect a right property tax or bring in more informal sector people into the formal economy to directly tax.
That's right.
Okay, so that's the problem he's having to solve. Don't forget that within this period, the Vice President has been going on and on about modernizing the economy, digital address system. All of these projects have suffered. National ID, they are in crisis. If you look at all that's been going on, digital address system started, it didn't take off really well. Even the port, which was supposed to be a key revenue saver, is still leaking, and I'm sure he'll tell you more about that. So it's a balance and a trade-off that is very difficult to do within one, which he could have kept or not touched all. He reduced a lot of them because the spare parts dealers were very excited. Now the spare parts dealers are saying, if you increase VAT, we won't be happy. Meanwhile, last year they were hailing him. We need to. So I don't really envy him at all. That would be his only reprieve. If those moves don't yield benefits, he's in big trouble.
Ensure compliance, etc., has done a good job at all. Because you remember, I don't know if we can get that video, we're going to deal with it, so compliance is better, etc. But yet, it appears it's like the previous government in ensuring compliance and widening the tax net. You have people in the informal sector in your area as well. What is the issue in dealing with this informal sector or roping in some of your members into the tax net?
Thank you very much. You know, we, as a people, with the last bit of your question, if you take in, year out, it is the same group of people who have found themselves in the tax bracket. They are the very people that, do you do the same thing? Do you really, you have sat with me for about all these various questions. Do you do that with every other business? Like, we have had too many interventions to sector. We have had a lot of interventions, and to quote the former president, President Kufuor, he says something that Sikam Perov, to wit, the trader, the investor, the one who holds capital, he has a few choices. It's happening on the ground. If you have an investor who has a lot of money, you don't necessarily find this in the economic book, but these are the things that happen. And
that's an issue. I think even Bernard, this morning you were touching on that on the breakfast show. The connect between what is on the ground and what we find the minister, for example, all finance ministers talk about, and then what is on the ground, and even the understanding of all that goes into the budget, etc. You always realize that the disconnect is so huge.
There's a challenge with managing Ghana. The speculation is easy, and it's easy to lie. So that's one. So managing information is difficult. So when people say GDP and all these things, they don't understand it. But that's not even the problem. They are known. We file tax returns because our office is known. We are people who are citizens with economy. Financial inclusion is also low. It means the banks don't have all the money in the bank. So in certain countries, if you do monetary policy, you cannot be taxed because we don't know where they are. People's monies are not in banks. So you can do a lot of things at the top, but at the base, you don't know what's happening. So the real, look at all the businesses. How many of them pay taxes? How many of them are even known? Even if you are not talking about taxes, what is the record? There's something we call the transmission. When you take a decision within tax, it must follow through. It's more difficult in this country because of the challenges of the info. So we can't toy with things like digital address system. We can't toy with things like national ID. You get me? And to compound all of this, look, there's GCNet there. There's West Blue. You have not resolved these matters, and workers are fighting with board chairman over procurement. How can you manage a port that's supposed to be your #1 revenue leaker? Okay, issues have not been properly dealt with because of the structural nature of our economy. And so a lot of these budget statements will just... Later on, I'll talk to you about the structure of the economy, which has other issues. Raw material importing and a lot of importations. But I feel that
you see, the port, like he rightly said, gives us a design geared toward what happens within the port. Changing tax policy. The question you want to ask yourself is, what kind of is it going to bring into the port when you want to exercise all these three at the same time? The future. All these data and tools at our disposal. Top it up, you have the human factor, you have the human who operate these systems on the ground. So one would have been expecting that when you want to do this, these are the vice president's team is doing on the ground. He has done the reviews with people on the ground, and then you have other sets of people calling some sort of shots. Then what it delivers is total confusion. You look at reshuffle here and there, other people's views are taken, the traders' views are taken, implementers' views are taken, customs, everybody. And then we all decide that, okay, having done all this, this is the way to go. Including, don't forget, if you don't, it is truncated. It is really stressful. And I tell you, as we go on, I'll be mentioning some of the interventions and some of the reviews that we were expecting and the spokes or spanners that have been thrown into the whole grinding wheel. It is not pleasant at all. If we're going to carry on this way, one thing that we can be certain of is to deliver a confused future. And when we do that, your guess is as good as mine. Everybody will hedge his expectation. The business person will hedge his expectation. All of us will on tenterhooks.
Okay, let's stay with the business community. Video, we went out, spoke to some businesses across, worried about the city's performance. They do not want any VAT increment, and they are not happy with reports that the National Health Insurance levy may go up, etc., etc. So let's watch what they said. Okay. No, you stay.
No, make for substitutes. You come.
No, they should bring it.
Their profit margins. The businesses have also warned against any attempt to increase VAT, since it will have a
to do our business. That's the main thing. Secondly, any tax that is problematic in terms of doing our business, we would wish that tax will be looked at. And secondly, it's not a matter of increasing taxes. That gives revenue to government, but rather looking at ways of collection, and then thirdly, widening the tax net so that we can get a large amount of people who are doing businesses and not pay anything into the tax bracket. Those are things that we wish they will look at. And then also looking at our port of entries. So we look at those taxes which we are still having problems with, like the 2% special levy that has been there since 2030. We feel it has outlived its usefulness, and you should look at that tax, whether abolishing it or reducing it. And then lastly, to do with the VA, because there's this thing in the air that there might be a probable increment in the VAT at the port of entry. If it's true, and we feel it's a problem, we seriously have to take a look at it. Then the VAT is a consumption tax, and therefore, if there's any increment in it, it's going to affect those of us like me and you who are all consumers. It will definitely increase prices.
The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, will be presenting the mid-year budget review to wishing Clement Boateng tasked government to stabilize the city.
The city, he said they are working out, they are putting things in order, and also try as much as possible, to shore up the reserve at the Bank of Ghana, so that it will, make the city regain its strength. So these are the areas that I'm looking up for the finance minister to address in the presentation of the media. Before you'll be able to going for the foreign currency. So if last week I was going to change $1,000 and I had to go with $4,000 to work on it, because when it happens like that, it impacts negatively on our business.
So we're bringing you a live coverage of City TV's mid-year coverage for the budget for 2018. My name is Vivian Kailoko. I'm in the studio here with three fine hosts for City FM, also the general manager for City TV and City FM. And then we also have Mr. Kwabena, who's the president for the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders, and we've been joining this and some of the challenges they had to deal with. We were at the port.
We even move up the income ladder to a middle income country. We become even much more. So the reason why our city is not stable is that we always have a balance of trade deficit. We are sending out more dollars than the dollars that are coming in. So in a very basic demand and supply analysis, your currency would fall. So that porters are putting pressure on the city by going for dollars to import. The government is also having to stabilize that. The US dollar has become stronger. The US has increased its Fed rate. It's giving, and therefore the cedi gains some strength against all other currencies. So much of what is not within us. So we need to start rethinking about whether we are going to be forever dependent on imports. Our country, so the average will have to rather use those goods rather than import them. Two, on the export side, we need to begin to add value to chocolate. When you see products, our domestic friends will now be producing goods, and then we'll be able to stabilize our cedi in case these external factors come in and we are caught wanting what to do to the cedi to stabilize it.
For me, I agree with everything you said, but I want to go a bit. Since I started studying economics, but that was artificial, deeper than contemporary issues. If you check, I was at an event where the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana said, for the first half of the year, we had turned our trade deficit into a surplus. Yet within that same period, the cedi depreciated. You know why? The place the trade surplus came from is not controlled. You have oil. So you can have dollars here. So you sell $300 million of oil, report it, only $100 million stays here. Go to many of our industries, mining, telecoms, banking. Invest here, they are not incorporated here, they are not compelled to keep their profits here. The amount of dollars sent out of this country every month to pay, there are free zones companies in this country, and we are investigating some of these things, who are huge. They export millions of dollars worth of products using a free zone system, which means their tax is lower. What do they do? All the money gets paid to their head office branch, and they only send operational expense into Ghana. So if they earn $1 billion, they probably send 100 million from fruit manufacturing to road contractors to fish processing to textile manufacturing, industrial, and the owners. And I'm not demonizing foreign-owned companies, but the point is that that structure has to change. So it's deeper than simply the trade deficit structure of ownership of the business, right? That's a very key point. Then the issue of consumption tastes. Okay, so when I go to Nigeria, I never eat Chinese rice or Thailand rice. I eat local Nigerian rice. If we don't make a policy about eating what we grow and growing what we eat, we spend over $300 million on just rice imports. Do you know what that must be? Agricultural self-sufficient. If you spend $300 million importing rice, number one, you are killing your local rice industry. Number two, you are putting pressure on the city. Christmas, they are sharing rice to their friends, and they are sharing oil and chicken. They don't take Daku Farms chicken. They don't have the will to do it.
Exactly.
That's the problem. The import lobby must be broken.
Well, let's see what we got from that.
According to government, it expects its flagship program, Planting for Food and Jobs, to increase production of selected crops for food security, and it specifically pointed out that a total of 500,000 farmers will be registered and 2,700 extension agents recruited to support the program this year. In the 2018 budget, that government contractors, as well as continue to facilitate and promote double cropping and update on steps taken so far to implement these policies.
So guys, this issue about the agri sector, ever since I've been a journalist, we talk about it every year. We want it to be one of the, if you look at the GDP, the contributors, we want it to go up.
You see, we have replicated the subsistence farming thing. The global framework has it such that the quotations, okay, if you take the European market, they used to sell. And these are folks who go for huge loans to set up. So you see that a lot of these pineapple farmers have set up camp here. They were producing, were exporting for them. And then they just dwindled. Okay, so the structure, it is something we cannot just wish away. We must consciously sit and tell ourselves that we want to move as a people going forward. We cannot wish some of these things. It seems
to start propelling your economy. And then once you have done agri so well, you begin to add value. So you are transitioning from agri to industry. And then you do industrialization so well so that you begin to export very highly sophisticated manufacturers. And then the service sector takes over. Unfortunately for us, we didn't get agri done properly. Nkrumah, with all his grand ideas, moved us into industrialization for good reasons at that time, because the East Asians had practiced what we call import substitution so well, and they had moved on to it. So he tried to do that, but we got a few things wrong. And then we moved into industrialization, set up so many industries to add value, at least to reduce our reliance on imports. And industry has not done so well, especially our manufacturing sector. And as Bernard was speaking, I listened carefully. Precisely so. Our local indigenous manufacturing growing. So we had that situation, and then all of a sudden, boom, the services sector takes over. We need to come back, because the service sector cannot drive our growth, because we've not gotten to that level of development where services should be the driver of growth. God has endowed us with. We need to produce agriculture, do it well, move from the subsistence level to commercialized farming, farmers to form cooperatives and begin to do large. You saw how Ghana struggled with a dip in our focus, our attention back on agriculture. Yes, oil is good, it's a resource, but it comes with a lot of curses. So what you take it as a windfall gain and you use it rather to build your infrastructural base and not to support countries that, if you take the East Asian tigers, whenever they got any windfall gain, it went directly into infrastructure, expand a productive base. Now, oil find and the revenue to go into expanding the productive to retain their power, because they will tell you, I need to be in power to implement my good plans. So it's all about them, it's not about Ghana. And that is why we are at the present point. I was on another media station not go, and when we were debating where quite critical issues, it turned into, I did this, you didn't do that, and as if Ghana didn't matter. I mean, and so that's the situation we always find ourselves. We need to be able to plan. It doesn't matter which government comes to power. Plan to make agriculture the main focus of our development policies, because that is the only way we can grow this economy. We cannot forget about agriculture.
These steps to address the financial lower business profits and personal incomes, as well as lower than expected revenue impact from several measures implemented so far. IMF had this to say in April 2018, and I quote, "Implementation of the ECF supported program has significantly improved in 2017, generating a buildup of external buffer power purchasing agreements, people, and easier heavy burden, which translates into real money in the pockets of fellow Ghanaians. As I indicated in the budget statement last year, it is always rewarding. Indicate that the real GDP grew by 6.8% for the first quarter of 2018 compared to 6.7% same period in 2017. The non-oil GDP grew by 5.4%, up from 4% during the same period of 2017. The fiscal performance for January to May 2018 shows that, Mr. Speaker, recorded a surplus of 1.35 billion compared with a surplus of 1.27 billion over the same period in 2017. Gross international reserve 8 billion, 4.2 months of imports by end of 20 years. Mr. Speaker, the performance of the Ghana cedi during the 18 months of the Akufo-Addo government has been in 3.60 years of Ghana's economic history since independence. The evidence shows, as much as we should, the solution to this problem, sure, Mr. Speaker, that the wealthy also pay their fair. Form the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Economic policy from social media. Mr. Speaker. With capacity of tax compliance and plug existing revenue leakages. Audit issues such as limited coverage, low auditor productivity, and low audit yields. A special VAT attack force The platform will provide government with an accurate and comprehensive view of telecom in order to verify tax compliance and to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the comprehensive billing and collection of all telecom-related taxes, levy, regulatory fees are enforced. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the PFM Act 2016, Act 921, overarching fiscal policy objective of consolidating its public finances received a significant boost in 2017. The fiscal deficit target was outperformed, moving the primary balance into a surplus. % fiscal deficit was financed largely from domestic sources.
Also being told in the budget that the city has performed creditably well for a greater part of the year, to what the minority made accusations that the Vice President, in his own words, has failed to keep the fundamentals strong for the economy. So these are some of the key things that we have been discussing, and I've been joined by the Executive Director for ASEPA, that is Thompson. That is, ASEPA stands for Alliance for Social Equity and Public Accountability, I presume. Welcome to City TV, City FM coverage.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the Finance Minister has presented his mid-year budget review. Your initial...
Some expectations ahead of this budget. And one of our expectations was that there would not be any increment in VAT or any introduction of any new taxes. Well, that expectation was widely met. The Finance Minister did not announce any increment in VAT. But what we heard was that VAT has been changed, with where we are going to have NHIS levy, where we are going to have levy, NHIL levy. So we are going to place the VAT, which is the value added tax rate, and we are going to introduce the levy. In the levy, generally, government is going to up some revenue by introducing the levy approach to this form of VAT or taxation approach, which was quite ingenious and innovative way of also raising revenue. But you cannot underestimate the impact of that also on the price of goods and services. Generally, people are going to pay more if you do the calculation in terms of the introduction of the new approach of the VAT. You are going to actually pay more, and so impact on the economy. What we're expecting to hear that we didn't hear was that the Finance Minister forgot that there's a positive or direct relationship between and revenue generation or taxation. You cannot tax people who are not employed, people who are not economically prudent, or people who are not economically engaged, can be able to pay taxes. So if you look at the amount of youth unemployment or graduates who are unemployed on the street, all these people are non-tax paying people. They are not paying taxes. And so we wanted to see a direct approach government is implementing to shove up employment, which will also increase revenue for government, because when they are employed, they will pay income taxes, they will pay other taxes that are accrued to the state. And so we didn't really see that approach by government to implement in a way as a way of also increasing its revenue base. We didn't see that. That was clearly missing from the finance minister.
Yes, but not to hold brief for the government. During the announcement of the major budget last year, November, they outlined the NAPCO, that is the Nation Builders Corps, which we are all attesting to the launch in March, and also the process of recruitment has begun. Wouldn't it be one of the approaches to employ people and tax them, suggesting subsequently late, maybe by the end of this year and next year onward? Doesn't it more or less give hope that employment is being created, which will result in the payment of taxes at least for some 100,000 graduates?
Definitely that solves part of the problem. I wouldn't say it has no impact. It solves part of the problem. But if you look at the impact on the actual problem, it's very small. I mean, if you look at the amount of graduate unemployment, it's huge. And we're happy when government reiterated in its manifesto that it was going to shift the focus of the economy from taxation to production. Now, production definitely means the creation of employment. Production, producing goods and services, going to be engaged, and so now you're going to have to employ more people. And so we're happy. We haven't seen that manifested yet in government economic approach. We haven't seen that shift in focus from taxation to production. We haven't seen that yet, and that is what we want to remind the government that yes, that approach clearly could be the icing on the cake
that will show up employment. That will also have a positive drive on the economy. Employment now goes. Local companies are going to be competitive. Okay, when we produce more, when we add value to our, become competitive. Now we're able to produce at a cheaper rate. You know, the inferior goods from China and other countries cannot compete and collapse. And so now you see that the government will be injecting more approach. Or in all these things, we want to see a deliberate policy from government that seems to people the opportunity to put food on the table, whilst they also do or also exercise.
Reach 23.8 billion cedis, down from the 24.6 billion cedis. Wouldn't you consider these as measures to protect the public purse so as not to overspend and generate more revenue to be able to address some of these issues that you are putting across?
A huge chunk of this is going to consumables. They are not going to capital expenditures or income generating projects. Mind you, income generating expenditures have a rippling effect. For example, if government spends money, the road has an economic impact in the area. It shows us economic and trading activities. Goods and services are able to move freely. If government spends money in building an office, in consumables, in administrator, like if you look at the capital allocation for the presidency, it's so huge that all these monies, the procurement toiletries and sanitaries and goods and things that are expended at the presidencies do not bring money back to the government.
But you know that they are also being tough on public procurement.
Of managing our fund, not doing that much.
You heard Mensa Thompson, who is executive director for the Alliance for Reaction we had impact, or that will influence their level of debate regarding discussions going forward. What are we to expect really on the floor of the House going forward regarding debate?
Well, this are no debate, Pius, because if you remember very clearly last year that the debate on this matter with regards to the method and procedure by which the finance minister came to much more fierce than what we had today. The minority still insists that for them, this should come in as a motion. Motion, the floor, laid, debated properly on the floor of the House with contributions from all sides, just as the budget just as the budget itself is done in November. You know, November after the budget is presented, there's at least a week or two, sometimes even close to a month, is devoted towards reaching the mechanics and the detail, the granular details before it's passed. But because it came in just as a statement, after the question was put, after that there was a seconding of the motion which was done by the minority leader. It was pushed by the
party that has said in opposition that borrowing is a lazy man's approach, and that they will move away from, and they called it reckless borrowing and all of that, all kinds of names. Today, look at what happened. More than 280 million euros over 11 separate loan items alone today, just before the presentation. Then you come to the presentation itself, and you see a government that not too long ago, about 6 months ago, had told us that they were moving from taxation to production. Now they've moved from taxation to production, super taxation, the imposition of more taxes. What they have done with the NHI and Get Fund is just to introduce VAT because what it actually means is that you are going to impose additional burden on the taxpayer. You are going to be collecting more from NHIL and Get Fund with the strict levy implementation. What they have also done with Ghanaian workers, those who earn above 10,000 cedis, is that they have increased the personal income, and so they are going to pay more, about 35%. I mean, that is excruciating. Now, if you are saying that you want the Ghanaian worker and those who earn more to share the wealth so that you can redistribute, it's not a bad principle. As a social democrat, taxes that target those who earn more and those who import large cars, it's not a bad principle. But you see, there's something called leadership by example. For today's budget presentation, which was coming to impose more taxes, Ghanaians will have expected that the size of government will have been reduced. This could 110 ministers. We don't. We don't need thousands of presidential staffers. So you are not leading by example. I hold in my hands the 2017 Auditor General's report. The Auditor General writes on page 11 that audit results, the overall financial impact of weaknesses and irregularities identified in the course of 375.19. I will investigate these further and, if possible, hold the officials accountable by way of disallowing the items of expenditure and surcharge. This is the Auditor General. Almost $1 billion cedis lost in 1 year alone due to all of these weaknesses and corruption, simply put.
But the Auditor General also mentions that it's going to ensure that persons found culpable will be surcharged. Isn't that an effort to claim back what is duly the country's, if really they've gone in? They haven't given assurance.
Yeah, certainly the Auditor General must be commended for promising to go after those who have taken our monies. But you see, we should not allow weak systems to exist, to allow for people to go dip their hands and collect taxpayers' money and misuse it, misappropriate it the way they like. Then we go after them after the fact, when the horses have bolted. That's not the way to save scarce resources. So I'm saying, when you look at the government's own conduct, the number of ministers, who hasn't complained about, from India to China to the United States, they don't have up to 40 ministers. We have 110. Historic numbers, acceptable. The number of presidential staffers, one will have thought that after appointing 110 ministers, you will have the lowest presidential staffers ever. And yet, if presidential staffers, there too, you make history. The wrong kind of history, the highest number of presidential staffers. So that's not the way to go. And then you see, I am also concerned that in this presentation, we didn't hear very clear attempts to address the following. That is a major concern to a lot of Ghanaians. It affects everything. General increases in goods and services across the board. Businesses are complaining, traders are complaining. So I thought that instead of the approach he adopted, where he went into history, oh yes, the currency is depreciating, but if you compare to 2015, 2014, 2013, the rate of depreciation is not as high. We must move on from that kind of politics. So okay, it's not that high, so we will not do anything about it. We are going to leave it like that because it is not as high as 2012, as 2013. Is that how we should build our country? So I was disappointed in that approach. We all know that we need to change the structure of our. We all know that if we don't address the trade deficit, we will not be able to really address these, structural issues. And I thought that I would hear very bold measures to address that. Instead of politics as usual, let's blame the other guys. And President Mahama has been out of office for how many months? Every paragraph, we have to mention President Mahama and go after President Mahama and blame President Mahama for everything.
Well, Mr. Okujeto Ablakwa, then again, you also admit that the announcement, so in the medium to long term, they are able to produce more, employ more people, export more, and help correct the balance deficit. This admittedly didn't start from last year under the NPP, neither did it start in 2016 or 2015. Doesn't some of these interventions point a hope of a reversal of these issues? And also we are understanding that for this period of time, the depreciation has also been impacted by developments on the global market, like the US interest rate going up and people anticipating that the MTN IPO also shift.
Not a bad idea, but the reality is that if you talk to folks, they announce the reduction in duties on spare parts. They say that ports, the duties rather went up, and that their businesses are on the ground. When you go talk to those who must feel it and experience it, they tell you that no, it's the other way around. What we expected to happen did not happen. So government will have to follow through, so that when you have come to Parliament and you have announced certain interventions, follow through with implementation to the end user, to be sure that the end user benefits. Because at the end of the day, it will make all of these in futility or deception, and that we don't really mean what we say.
This morning, there are 10 or so loans that were
11, yes,
11 that were forwarded to the Finance Committee of Parliament, and you were telling me earlier on that the majority of them are past government projects that were initiated.
Yes, the understanding I have is that most of them, for instance, you can talk about the rehabilitation and re-equipping of the hospitals like Kibi Government Hospital.
This is City TV, and we're bringing you Ms. Vivian Kai. Local in studio, I have with me Bernard Able. Yeah, developed.
Whether they are opening up districts that will provide an incentive for firms to go into a district to add value to whatever we produce there. So I'm not too sure about adding roads to it, because I have to come with very good roads. I can get it to the nearest port, suppose I want to export, so that it reduces my cost of production. So if these roads are being built out of that, and they are also meant to provide infrastructure, what is important to note is the minister has made it clear that these are the roads that have been earmarked for.
The Gang of Four, and there was another one every year that appears in the...
of course, Greater Accra and then Ashanti region overpopulate the list of roads that have to. I mean, you also mentioned, and even the fact that we are lucky being a port that was the coast, we are not taking advantage of it. We need as much as possible to look for the resources to build a road line right from the coast to the northern part of this country. So it is something that we should not just pay lip service to, because I've heard this. We're expecting to see trains on these roads moving up and down with goods and also with people. So that is something that we should be happy about. And also a few things about the energy sector, but my main issue has to do with the roads. And I think that if we're able to do these roads, I mean, it will go a long way in supporting the 1D, 1F initiative.
Well, I will talk first of education briefly. So I noticed that we are spending almost 900 million cedis on free SHS. And when I look at the allocation, it is bank beds, student mattresses, we're still paying. We need some more clarity and light there. Otherwise, as Ebo said, it's not going to be sustainable. Their own workers have to do. We've spoken about a way of bringing infrastructure. Bill Vivian, if you give somebody $1 million to build a road from Dodi Pepe, you do the road with labor-intensive public works. That means you bring in the labor from the local community. You are transforming the economy. So I need more details on this bauxite barter issue. All right? Is it the Etiwa forest? What's the trade-off? There are people who are saying we shouldn't mortgage our bauxite for anything, much less in a forest, which is supposed to be a World Heritage Site. All right? Like a lot. I know he's been doing a lot of visits and consultations. We were told that, yes, they have done some 14
this year for work to begin next year.
So I expected a lot more on that. On the road side, if you analyze the roads, you need to analyze it not by how many roads are being done by total kilometers, because urbanization. The roads have been broken down, right? It's very possible that the Volta region roads, kilometer-wise, could be more than even the Greater Accra. Because Volta region, the Boga Road, Christo Asafo Road, Pure Water. A lot of the roads, Vivian, are in peri-urban Accra, and I'm very happy with that because somewhere Wager. These places have characteristics of both urban and rural development. So roads in those places like Amasaman, Trobu, Ofanko, very, very important. Elang, very, very important. So I am happy that roads were picked. Because look, people will live, somebody lives at Pokwasi and Manfrom. It takes them 45 minutes to get to Festus Junction before they pick it. I'm excited about the kind of roads I'm seeing in Greater Accra because I understand Greater Accra very well. I don't know too much about some other regions to speak on it. Volta will be disappointed that they didn't hear that below Hohwe, Eastern Corridor roads were being done. Because the president went there last week, spoke about the road and the noise and all that. Boom, 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 boom. So I thought a few more roads. All right. What confuses me though is that you are reducing local capital expenditure, right? So why are you going to get the roads to bauxite and railway makes more sense?
Yeah, I think that maybe this is the first part of whatever they are receiving.
Okay.
They are looking
to look out for from there.
Yes, it kept being repeated. But for me, I have a certain bias. And if you look at our, like you mentioned, transformational economy of the state. And I also want to look at the intercity coaches where procurement processes have been completed for acquisition of 100 buses to augment the current fleet. I think these things are that is happening. You know, sometimes some of these interventions come, and once the procurement bit of it has been done, then it is left, and that is what we must not encourage.
Right. So, gentlemen, we have to end here, but I'll take your final comments in general about this, and then we'll wrap up.
The devil is in the detail. It's well-intentioned budget. Clearly admits there are shortfalls in revenue. A lot of work to be done, because they are essentially 1.5 years. So between July and December 2019, you have to deliver. Because when you enter January 2020, the nation switches to elections. So it's about what you've done, not what you will. So I hope they are cognizant of delivery. And it's a very sad situation because, look, to develop a country, you don't need to do things in 2.5 year bites. Exactly. We've created a system where, look, last month, they are still appointing people. I'm not even sure if the special prosecutor has started working fully. And we are in July 20, right? And it started in January. So it tells you a year is lost in appointing. A year is lost in politics. And you have 2 years. Now, if you come into power January 2017 and you do all the negotiations to start a power plant, probably start it in, even optimistically, January 2018. When will the power plant finish? Do you get me? So we need to think, and that's what I was saying earlier before the break, that we need to lock some policy initiatives within the framework of the directive principles of state policy and national development plan, and stop playing politics with them. So we know that comes to power, you are going to implement free SHS, you are going to complete the rail sector. So then the space of maneuverability is reduced to things we can't with. Our development agenda should not be politicized. Otherwise, we will not develop. So for me, that this is a good budget. Let's see how they implement it and follow through. And let's see how effective the GRA becomes in collecting the revenues, and then how effective the construction people are, because clearly we need infrastructure development. I will leave it there for now.
Okay, I'm excited about the tax measures that have been outlined, especially the one regarding taxes that would be paid by the government says that it's doing something about being efficient about its spending. I hope it's not just a statement that the minister is telling Ghanaians. Look at last year, almost 900 million in terms of very efficient. I was expecting maybe I expect the president to come to the ministry. So we should look at rationalizing some of these ministries and then putting them together so that at least Ghanaians will know that the president is doing something about, especially the budget coming from his presidency, those that are there as presidential staffers and all of that. So that once those good faith and trying to do something about the spending, then Ghanaians will be willing, if they are asked to pay more, because certainly it's for the good of every Ghanaian that will do well. So good work. Excited about a lot of the initiatives in this media review. I just hope that whatever monies will be collected out of that will go exactly into what has been. We don't want to come next year and then the budget is being presented, and then, like I said, some of these schools will find themselves on our budget and we couldn't do this last year. The 1D, 1F has not taken off properly. We need to. And I'll sound a note of caution. We shouldn't be targeting all our districts at the same time. We can take about a few of them and then make sure that we send infrastructure there and those factories so that it will spare on other initiatives that will come up in other districts. Because if we cast our net wide in terms of 1D, 1F, we lose focus. Look for those agricultural products that we need to immediately add value to so that we can export and then send the 1D, 1F initiative so that we create jobs at the same time, add value to our exports, and then bring in more export receipts. So this is what I have to say for this media.
For me, hinge community. So I therefore pray spectrum of look at the solution, listen to all the critical stakeholders on the ground before we agree to any solutions that anyone's coming with to the pot, because we need that to get revenue from to make it happen. We put in effort to be able to achieve it. Thank you.
Okay. I would want us to leave with a video of speaking to the ordinary Ghanaian of what they understand about some of the words that we use in the example this morning. Ken Ofori-Atta was mentioning words like GDP, inflation, fiscal deficit, all these words. What do they mean to the ordinary Ghanaian? So watch this video on their responses to some of these words, how they understand those words. Before we bring you that video, Bernard, you have watched that video. Were you surprised with some of the words?
I think it's very interesting how a lot of things we say here, so the language of the budget must be
fiscal deficits, the physical things of the economy, like imports, all those stuff. If it's in a deficit, then then physical deficit. You understand what I mean? Yeah.
Physical deficit, I think it's about how the market is going. Like when you sell, how people are buying it, how you are getting your money, like budget is going.
And how about GDP? Do you understand what GDP means?
No, I don't know the meaning.
You don't have no idea?
GDP. Guyana daily price.
And when they say exchange rate, do you have exchange rates?
Yeah. Like example, like you are having salt. I'm having pepper. I need salt to put in my soup. You need pepper to put in your soup. So I will exchange my pepper with your salt so that everything will be okay. No war, only peaceful.
Do you understand what fiscal deficit means?
No, I don't.
How about inflation?
No.
You haven't heard of inflation before?
I've heard before. I don't understand it. Like how the economy that.
Do you understand what GDP means?
GDP? No, really. I really don't understand.
How about inflation?
Yeah, I don't understand inflation.
What?
Me.
So do you understand what debt stock means?
Debt stock? Debt stock, as in maybe you owing and maybe it has piled up.
How about fiscal deficit?
No, I don't understand that.
So interesting one there, guys. Well, how people understand all these words every day. Well, we have to leave it there on this note. That's it. Host of the City Breakfast Show. He's also the general manager for City.